What's up guys, Riley from Nightland Films here, and welcome to my first build video on this channel. Well, proper build video I guess. I've done some earlier before, but they're not quite up to the standard that I really like to anymore. So before I get into it, and going into all the pieces that I have 3D printed here, I've got to give a huge shout out to Valentine Costumes, the guy who actually made the 3D file for this. He's super nice. I actually did contact him because I had a problem with the sword. Basically, the way it's designed and the way that I really like 3D printed swords now is that they have either some sort of metal or steel core on the inside of them so they don't flop around. So like you probably saw in my tour video, I have a Replica Longclaw that has no steel core, and I might just throw in a video here of me just waving it around. You can see how much it bends and like flops around and doesn't really even feel like a sword. Compared to something like my Thor swords, for example, which is up here, and I'll just insert a little video now of me waving it around, you can see that it's much more stable. And that's because it has a threaded core in the middle of it. So with this file that Valentine Costumes made, he actually designed it so on the inside of this sword, I don't know how well this camera is actually going to pick it up, and you can kind of see it there. The way he designed it is so you can have a metal core in the middle of it, as well as some little rods. My local hardware store doesn't really sell rods that are really that thin, so I actually contacted him on his Thingiverse page, and he actually designed it so that the metal core actually goes the length of the sword, because it doesn't before. So this is the metal core of the sword. This is just something that I just picked up from Bunnings, which is the local hardware store in Australia. I could imagine for any sort of American viewers that somewhere like Home Depot, I guess, would sell something like this. But basically how I'm going to make this sword is, yeah, you just thread all the pieces together, like so. Except I'll go into how I actually am going to thread this in the sword now. So this is a rough sort of assembly of the entire sword laid out. This is a pretty bloody big sword. An extra thing that I thought I might just mention to make my life a bit easier. What I've done so I don't have to fiddle around with what piece goes where, is that in each part where it's separated, I've just labelled it from 1 to 6. So as you can see here, I've just labelled it 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, and so on and so on. So then I don't have to worry about any extra pieces that I somehow accidentally put in the wrong place. So I've actually done a rough assembly of this sword already, with some of the older files, before I actually had the core that actually went the entire length of the sword. So basically what I do is I thread the core into the slots, however, the tolerances are too tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my heat gun, heat up the plastic, because this is 3D printed, it is plastic. I'm going to heat it with the heat gun, and then I can insert the core very carefully, and then basically just tap it on with a rubber mallet. And hopefully that won't damage it too much and warp the plastic too much. And then I have a nice tight tolerance on the inside with the core. So the hilt here I'm actually not going to worry about too much because this doesn't need as much strength. The way it's designed it is really nice. It's just a negative of a circle that just fits on like that. And I mean, if I strengthen that up with a bit of super glue and some other bits and pieces, I don't have to worry about it too much. So let's get on to the actual blade run of this. So again, I thought I'd just demonstrate what I'm actually doing. So this is one of the newer pieces that I reprinted that Valentine was so kindly enough to actually put the metal core into. So the metal core that I have, I couldn't get the exact type of measurement that he modeled for. I think mine is a couple mil each side, a bit too big. So what I'm basically doing is, like I said before, since it is plastic, it's a lot more malleable. So I'm just hitting it with the heat gun down at the bottom. being careful not to actually overdo the heat gun, because I don't want to warp the plastic. And then carefully inserting it onto the metal core, and then just giving it a little tap. Small little taps, just to insert it. Like so. Once it gets a bit more harder, and once it's actually in the slot for the metal core, I'll then get the heat gun once again, and then I'll just run it up the length in the middle of the actual blade itself, just so I heat that one part and it just becomes a little bit more malleable and easier to hit this down the actual length of the core. Again, I can't stress it enough, trying to be as careful as I can, trying not to actually warp the plastic. I think it's out the middle, just like that. So I was so close to finishing it. Had a bit of an emergency with literally the last piece. Basically, as you could have seen, that last piece, I don't know why I didn't want to go on. I know I said I was just going to put this on and not use the hammer, but with my 3D printer, the tip was pretty much screwed anyway. I was going to redo the tip, so I kind of just smashed it with the hammer. Basically what happened was, as I was trying to put it on, it warped a lot with the heat gun. Yeah, as you can see the big dips here. I'm going to try my best to try and correct that again with the heat gun, and maybe just some slight taps and remolding it while it's still pliable. If not, I guess I'll just have to reprint the tip, I guess, but we'll see. I'll try my best to fix it. If not, you'll see. So attaching the pommel is going to be pretty straightforward. All I'm really going to do is hold one piece from the underneath, and it's just going to be held together with super glue, guys. All I'm really going to do is just roughen the surface a little bit. This basically just gives the super glue something a bit more to grip on. That's pretty much all I'll need. And then a bit of dab super glue in there, like that, and then I'll just go with super glue over the top of that, and then be kind of generous with it over the rest of it, and then attach the other side to it, and try and hold that as tight as I can to prevent that seam line from showing so much. And that's the pommel on. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go over with super glue inside some of the seam lines where the pieces join and do a permanent bond for them together, just so it adds a little bit of extra strength, especially between these blade parts here. So, now that we have the sword finally assembled, my god, this thing is huge, and actually super glued and held together, the next thing I'm going to be moving into is filling in all the seam lines here and try and make them as smooth as possible. So before I actually start the filler process, what I'm actually going to do is just sand all of these little joins in between here, just so it makes it a little bit more flush, and so it doesn't make the filler as obvious. Alright, so it's time for the filler. Basically what I'll be using is this product here. It's a multi-purpose filler. Typically this is the sort of stuff that you use to patch up your walls when someone punches a hole in it, or you just have like a dent in your wall. I love this because it's super easy to sand, and typically with this sort of stuff it dries in anywhere between like half an hour to an hour. So it sets relatively quickly too, and I can just layer the stuff upon each other. And with a extra primer filler over the top of it, you won't be able to even tell that this is a sort of plastery sort of thing. So I'm basically just going to use this to seal up these sorts of bigger cracks here, as well as these parts here. So yeah, let's get started. Alright, so I've just got some 150 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to try and sand away all the excess that I don't need. Don't need much force to it, really. Alright, so now this bad boy is all puttied up, nice and smooth in between those seams. What I'm going to focus on now is rebuilding the tip. So what I'm going to do is use this stuff called Knead It. I have a feeling this is an Australian exclusive thing. Maybe, I'm not sure. But basically what this stuff is also a putty, but this stuff sets absolutely rock hard. And it has the catalyst on the inside of it. I just snipped off a little bit of it here, because I don't need much, because it's a tip for a sword. And basically all you do is just mix it until it's one solid colour. On the inside of it, I don't know, can you focus please? Oh, there we go. Yeah, on the inside it's a really dark colour, on the outside it's really light. So once that two mixes together and you don't see any darker spots, it's basically, it'll begin setting and it's fully set in half an hour. It's a lot like the other sealer putty that I used, except this is a lot stronger. So I'm going to use that for the tip of it, and it's also sandable, so I can remold it into anything I want. So let's do it. Alright, now that the tip has finally cured, what I'm basically going to do now is I'm just going to grab my Dremel here, and this is a much easier way because it is a lot thicker, it is a lot harder to sand. So if I just get a Dremel, I'll get all the excess here that I don't need, leaving the tip. Fuck! So since I kind of fucked that tip, luckily I had a little bit of that Knead It left over, so I just managed to sand it into a tip, and I'm just going to super glue that back on. Alright, so moving on to the filler primer that I'm going to be using. This is the stuff that I use. I just get this from my local Super Cheap Auto. No idea for international people where the hell you get this sort of stuff. But this is great, it's cheap, and it's a spray putty as well as a primer. So I can kill two birds with one stone, and also fill in the gaps. So let's get started. So I've done a couple of coats already of that filler primer, and already it's looking really good. The seam lines aren't as visible as I thought they would be, to be honest. And just to make it a lot smoother, I'm going to do a technique known as wet sanding, which sounds exactly how it is. It's basically, I'm going to take some high grit sandpaper, some 400 grit, and I'm going to get some water, get a bit of water, just dab it on the sword a bit, and then let me put down my camera so I can actually use both hands. Take a bit of sandpaper, and then literally on the part that I just wet, ooh, that's blocking the shadow, come over here. The part that's wet, I am going to just sand that, and what that's going to do is actually push the filler around while it's still pliable and make it so much more smoother. Any extra holes that have been fiddly or anything like that, typically this is the sort of phase where you can just fix that. So I've done my first sanding pass to it. The seam lines aren't perfect, I will say that. Come on, focus please. There we are. But honestly, I'm not too fussed about it, because I'm gonna go for a really, like, battle damage, sort of bloodied up sword. I don't really like clean things, so honestly I can kind of hide, as Adam Savage would say, hide a lot of my crimes. So what I'm basically just gonna do now is I'm just gonna fucking paint it. I'm just gonna start with my chrome, which I'm just gonna do all over, because the only parts that aren't really chrome are the handle here. And they're gonna be wrapped up with a special leather, anyway, which I'll have and I'll show you after all this. Also, quickly, the paint that I'm using, it's just some cheap aluminium paint, to be honest, from my local hardware store, Bunnings. It is cheap, but it does the job. Alright, so it's the next day, and already this thing is looking really good. So the next thing I'm going to work on is I'm going to wrap the grip here. So I just happen to have some black leather grip left over, because ages ago I wrapped my katana there that I just bought from a convention, because I wanted to. So yeah, I'm going to wrap the grip, and once that grip is wrapped, I'm going to start weathering the thing. So I'm pretty sure I'll actually have enough black wrap to actually wrap this thing. I've got heaps of it. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm just going to dab a little bit of super glue onto the end, and then I'm going to start wrapping and then finishing it with more super glue. So the wrap isn't my finest work, but my god, it feels amazing. It already just starts to feel like a sword. And this is how much wrap I had left out of that roll that I had. My god, I come close. I was a bit worried. I wasn't quite sure if this part up here was also wrapped. Thankfully it's not, so far so good. Next part we're going to move on to is my favourite part, weathering it. Alright, so to weather this, what I'm basically just going to do is an acrylic wash. So in the cup I just have some bit of water here, and this is just some cheap, like, black acrylic paint, guys. This is a 250ml bottle of paint, acrylic paint that is, and I mean, it cost me $2, it's not that expensive, and I go through heaps of these. So basically what I'm going to do is just plop a little bit of paint, it's probably about enough. Fill that up. And then what I'm going to do is just mix that to the water, like so, till I get a nice black, sort of watery sort of stuff. Alright, so for this black acrylic wash, all I'm literally going to do is just take a little bit of that mixture we made and just put it on the sword like so. And then all I'm going to do is grab a paper towel and then just dab. what I really want to do is I want to really get the paint to get in these grooves and these glyphs on the sword here, to make it look like they're dirty and just make it stand out that little bit more. So what I just did instead was I just grabbed a little bit of the black acrylic paint and then dipped it into the water and then put that all over the sword and then dabbed away, because this is what I really wanted, that sort of really dirty, gritty look. Over the moon with how this turned out. I knew that final stage of that acrylic wash would finally bring out all these beautiful glyphs and details, and really, once again, I'm just gonna have to give a massive shout out to Valentine Costumes for helping me with this 3D model and actually providing it for free on Thingiverse. And if you have a 3D printer, please give this a download. He offered in the comment section, he offered a section with the actual steel core. Before the steel core didn't actually go the length of the blade, but if you do actually have the 0.2mm rods that actually fit through the entirety of it, go for it. Do whatever fits for you. I might actually do another build in the future, because he did do the Wolven silver swords. So if I'm going to do a Geralt costume in the future, I guess I am going to have to print the silver one too. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you like this sort of thing, please give me a like, comment, all that sort of stuff. Really helps the channel. Subscribe. I'm going to try and do weekly sort of videos with whatever build that I'm doing. And depending on what the build is, I might actually offer it for sale down in my eBay store or Etsy store down below. Thanks so much for watching.